Hello, good afternoon and a warm welcome to you all. I'm Jocelyn Shaw, Corporate Portfolio Change Manager at Health Education England, and I'd like to extend thanks for joining the NHS Project Futures Festival today. Just before I hand you over to our key speaker, Melanie Franklin, may I just let you know the format of the virtual festival. You'll see on the right of the screen there's a panel containing a chat function and Q&A. The chat is perhaps obvious, and the Q&A is for you to put questions to Mel as you think of them, if you'd like to, of course. A festival game code will have been shown on the screen at the beginning of the session, and that's for arriving on time. If you just want to jot this down in the notes tab on the right hand side of the screen, and then we'll also give you a game code at the end of the session. Towards the end of Mel's presentation, there will be a Q&A session. Please feel free to vote on each other's questions, with those questions with the most votes appearing at the top. Now, to introduce you our key speaker for the session, Melanie is acknowledged as a thought leader in agile change management through academic research and practical consulting for global organisations as diverse as the United Nations, the private sector, the NHS and central government functions in Europe and the Middle East. Melanie is the Chief Examiner for the Agile Change Agent certification. She was a co-lead for the Change Management Institute UK chapter and is the founder of the Continuous Change Community. She's also a respected author of numerous textbooks and articles on agile change. Melanie is responsible for the successful delivery of agile transformations using the concepts and principles of many agile approaches. She is a talented communicator who uses not only humour and her bucket loads of passion, but her own practical experiences to engage, illustrate and deliver. So, without further ado, I would like to welcome Melanie to the stage.
Thank you. I feel kind of exhausted listening to that. For what it's worth, what I'm imagining at the moment is that I'm standing on a stage with a podium in front of me and there's several hundred of you sitting in front of me. So I'm trying to imagine this as a real conference. So I'm going back into the past to try to remember what this feels like. So let's see if I can make a bit of sense. And more to the point, I want to give you an opportunity to process the things that I'm saying. I don't want to get to the end and you go, I kind of remember a few things. So we're going to break at about 25 minutes past or through this presentation so that you can debate in breakout rooms that are going to be run through Microsoft Teams. Now that's way beyond my technical capability, but Jocelyn is going to make sure it all runs really smoothly. So meanwhile, I'm going to sort of put a hypothesis to you about agile change management. And then what I'd like you to do is perhaps turn back to me and go, you know what, there's some benefit in what you're saying. Actually, this is useful because. So the breakout rooms are going to be for you to concentrate on maybe thinking why what I'm saying is relevant and why it fits with perhaps the future of project management. So that's my plan anyway. So let's get started. And I think what we're all recognizing these days is that we don't have the luxury of just dealing with one change. And this was true very much of a pre-COVID world, as much as what we're suffering through at the moment, I think. But we don't have that luxury of planning something, knowing that give or take, it pretty much will go exactly according to plan. And that once we've done maybe a year, 18 months, even 2 years of a big project, we can then go live and there'll be a big launch. And then we'll move into that sort of behavioural change piece where people start to use what we've created. I began my career in that way because I used to be a project manager. I became a program manager, program director, and then global head of project and program management for several organizations. And that's what we used to work on. It was that more traditional approach. We gathered all the requirements and we planned out how they would flow in a logical flow, but it would get us to that end point. And we knew that we could go live. The problem these days is that planning horizon doesn't seem to exist anymore. And what we do is not only are we looking at the planning horizon being affected by sort of lots of factors that are out in the wider market, but we're also affected by all the other changes that are taking place. So what happens is that we end up in this vicious circle of shorter term change because we can't plan that far into the future. We do waves of change, hoping that it will come together. And so is everybody else. So at any one time, in any given working day, we're trying to assimilate changes that we've already been working on for a while, so they're starting to feel normal. Changes that we're sort of in the middle of trying to make happen, and changes we're just hearing about now, and we're trying to work out where that's going to take us. So I think we all recognise that there is this very high volume of change that we're dealing with, and that projects are triggering more and more change. I run the Continuous Change Community, which is a global thought leadership group. The secret's in the name, I think. And when we were looking at what did we want to call our group, it was a working title that I thought we'd probably make more sophisticated later on. But people seem to love the idea that, yeah, continuous change, because that's what we're going through. So I wanted to set that as our context and just remind ourselves just how much really is affecting everybody all at the same time, before I sort of get into what on earth I mean by agile change and perhaps why it's the right thing to be doing right now. And then after you've had a chance to process some of what I've said, we're going to come back and look at some of the skills, the leadership skills for making it a reality. And again, I'm going to invite you to have a bit of a go. That work will be individual work. So if you're the kind of people that like to have a pen and paper ready, or if you like to make notes on your phone, you can do either of those things. It's just thinking that I'm going to invite you to do. Thinking about maybe a change you're involved in, a project that's going on at the moment. It could be home or work related, but I am going to give you a chance to try to apply some of the things that I'd say, so that you walk away with maybe some ideas of how to do things differently back at work. So onwards and upwards then. So what is agile change? Well, I think the first thing to say is that agile change brings together the project activities that create tangible change, with change activities that provide, well, the encouragement, the support, the nudging, to adopt new ways of working. So we need to use the project deliverables to create new ways of working. And it's essential that the worlds of project and change management are brought together, because as you can see with a little star here in the middle of the screen, we only get business value, we only realize benefits when we're actually using what it is that our project has created. I have run hundreds of projects over the years. I've commissioned hundreds of projects. I've invested millions and millions of pounds for my clients. And I know that I can create a business case that says, hey, I'm going to spend £13.5 million creating this new distribution centre for you, or I'm going to put in this new system that costs £4.5 million. But if the people that are using the new IT system or working in the distribution centre don't change how they work, then we won't realise any of that investment. It won't make a difference. So it seems obvious to me, but that's because I've been doing it so long, that project activities, the tangible change, it's great that we have well worked out routines for creating things on time and on budget to the right level of quality. But we're missing a trick if we don't partner it with all of the behavioural change activities. And what that means is that it's helping people, not just on the left-hand side to create stuff, but on the right-hand side to work out, okay, how does that work in practice? What process do I need to follow now? Because that bit's been automated of my job and we don't do that step anymore. So it's about people working out in their own minds. What is it that I need to do? In what order do I need to do it? And maybe start to think about any policies or standards that we maybe need to refresh. Any new metrics where we can measure people's productivity differently, perhaps. But that's got to be combined with perhaps a different view of how they see their role in the organisation, how they see the value that they create, what their attitudes are to their work. So whenever any of us are going through a change, the change is triggered by that tangible output from projects, but it's actually that behavioural change transition curve, as I've shown you here. It is that sort of ski slope. It's because, of course, when we first try to do anything new, and if you'd seen me trying to log on to a new banking app this morning, you would have seen exactly what I meant, as my productivity plummeted, as something as simple as paying one of the bills seemed to be beyond me. But with practice and resolving it over time, I'll start to come out the other side. And maybe in a few weeks' time, I won't even notice that they've changed all the screens and they've changed how it works. It'll become the new norm. But that is a personal decision of mine to invest the time, to not beat myself up when I make mistakes, to have the resilience to dig in when things aren't going well and come out the other side. So that's really what we mean by agile change, is that we combine the two, and there's a really good reason. The reason is, unless we do so, we don't actually have change. What we have is we have deliverables, we have outputs, but they haven't made a difference. So it's important that we actually align the two of these worlds. Now, what is agile change? The agile here refers to the incremental nature of these deliverables. So if we start to look at a more agile approach, what we move from is this traditional approach where I had perhaps quite a long planning horizon. I would gather all the requirements, I would move, through my Gantt chart, and eventually end up with being able to go live at the end. So that implementation of the full solution that would eventually lead to that return on investment. But actually, maybe that's not the smartest way to do things. In a world, and I think there's a presentation in this festival about a VUCA world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I don't think any of us have ever felt it stronger than right now. In that uncertain, ambiguous world, maybe the sensible approach would be to actually do a little bit and see what effect it has, see what benefits we get, see what difference we make. This agile approach gets rid of the risk. On the top line of this diagram, there's a risk here. There's a risk that the end goal is no longer relevant, that actually it's been overtaken by changes in circumstances inside and outside of the organisation. There's also the risk that if I spend time perfecting what I can put into place, which is what I'll do in that traditional approach, I'll gather all the requirements for all the different features and functions, and I'll pull it all together in a logical sequence, but I'm going to keep you waiting for 18 months. The thing is, and I had this recently with a client, effectively what that supplier did was they went quiet for 18 months. Now, if you happen to be piloting a nuclear submarine, going quiet while you're sailing in foreign waters is a very good thing to do. If you happen to be trying to service your customers in an active marketplace, going quiet is a really dumb thing to do. And of course, what did the customers do? They got frustrated over those 18 months. They were promised improvements, but 18 months is a very long time. So, of course, they started to go to other suppliers. It's really a dangerous thing to do. And of course, there's the risk that the sponsorship and therefore the money will run out. We know that there is actually quite a revolving door for senior executives in any organisation. People get poached, people get promoted, people get let go, and a different voice comes in. And then we have the next new 100-day plan, and maybe your project isn't part of it. So there's always that chance that perhaps we're going to get stopped in our tracks anyway. So why don't we work towards actually having these interim deliverables where at least we've made some improvement, we've made some difference before we actually need to stop. So for me, agile change makes perfect sense in this VUCA world. Here's another view of agile change. The agile this time sort of refers to the flexibility in responding to changing circumstances. As you can see along the top line here, we had our original end goal. We kind of knew where we were heading, but actually circumstances have changed over time. That's amended. Now what we need to do is we could carry on as we are, but I'm not sure that's the brightest thing we could do. Maybe what we should do is alter course a little bit. Maybe some things are less of a priority now than they were before, but other new things have come in. So let's remain flexible. And again, the bottom diagram, the end goal is further amended. So we change direction. Why is that helpful? Well, we don't just keep going because we started something, we should finish it. What we're doing instead with this approach is we keep going because the feedback and the impact of our early deliverables can help shape what our next deliverables will be. And therefore, my decision making certainly is more accurate because I'm actually doing evidence-based decision making. And that evidence is in the moment. It's not a hypothesis, it's in the moment. I'm getting that feedback, I'm hearing what we should do next, and I'm responding to that. So again, I think really important piece. My clients who are really good at change, they don't always know that this is what they're doing because they do it so seamlessly. But what underpins their approach is that, first of all, there is a huge amount of open discussion about, are we doing the right things? So there's very much a sort of an openness and a curiosity and a willingness by leaders to sort of change direction if there is evidence to do so. They don't seem to have that fear of, well, 6 months ago I said we should do this, and now if I change my mind, I'll look like I've got egg on my face. They don't have that sort of self-interest and that worry about how they might appear. They're just constantly striving to be doing the most relevant, the right thing. And that curiosity and that willingness to be flexible is certainly backed up by that horizon scanning, that idea that they keep looking for what else is changing, and that actually there's a structure within their organizations to do that. So those are the sorts of things that I see all of the time. And for me, this agile change approach makes perfect sense on an economic basis, because one of the things you can see here is that I do get that early and frequent return on investment. I don't wait for maybe 18 months and then start to see improvements. Actually, I'm starting to see early improvements. I had a classic example with a customer who the director of engineering had said, if we keep our heads down and we keep going in the traditional way, end to end, it'll take about 12 months to make a difference. And he was doing a business intelligence function, and the marketing director was going crazy, going, no, I can't wait 12 months. I need to know a lot more about our business. I need to sharpen up on our marketing and our sales activities right now. There are certain key groups that I need to know about, and I need to know about them earlier than 12 months. And the head of engineering was going, it makes no sense. You're asking me to do little shifts all of the time. Well, if I do a little bit, I'll have to unpick some of what I've done when I go on to do the next bit. That's going to elongate the whole thing. Maybe it'll take 13 and a half months. It's an extra 6 weeks we're funding. That's a ridiculous waste of resource. And the marketing manager came straight back in and went, no, it's not. Because actually the value of that early return on investment, when we're selling more to some of those first customers, is going to pay for the later developments. So you'll see that every time we go live, we're looking to get that genuine return on investment. And I get really excited by this, because I do think that it starts to turn the world of project and change management from being a cost center and therefore a burden to the business to being an early profit center. So I find that there's some real excitement in there for me about the difference that this makes to how we do business. Now, I think the key thing that I wanted to do was hand over to you guys and say, what do you think? Do you think that some of the things I'm laying out here with this more agile approach makes sense? Have you got any stories to share in these breakout rooms with others where you perhaps have had some similar experiences, or you want to just debate some of the things that I've said? I want to give you a quarter of an hour to do that, because I find at these conferences, just listening to people without time to think and process isn't that helpful. So I'm going to hand over to Jocelyn, who's going to make it all work now, I think, because this is the question. Having heard me for a little bit, what are the benefits in your mind of agile change? I'm going to invite people to write into the chat function when you come back from your breakout rooms any comments, and Jocelyn's going to read out a few of those before we carry on and start learning some of the skills associated with this.
Thank you, Mel. If you can just go look in the description box underneath the main screen, you will see 2 links which will take you to a Teams meeting. They are split up between the alphabet, so please take the letter of your surname. If you're unable to get into one, please do try in the other. And if you are having problems, please feel free to just have a think and still drop your comments and feedback in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks for the feedback. Some of you who obviously know me have even sent screen prints into my WhatsApp account to show me that you were all chatting. So I kind of like that. I want to pick up on your comments. So if you want to put some stuff in the chat, anything you've said, Jocelyn's reading all of that right now and trying to assimilate that into some points she can share with us. So she's going to summarize all of your feedback. Meanwhile, somebody put a question in and I thought I'd take the opportunity now to answer it while Jocelyn does the reading up. And it was this one here, which is, the comment was, are all project managers change managers and vice versa? And I don't think we are. I still think, and I will say this as somebody who was global head of project and program management for a number of years and ran lots of big project teams in 38 countries or whatever, but also somebody who leads large scale transformations both in the UK and across the world. And I think that they are very much complementary disciplines. And I think the most important thing we can achieve is that I'm not expecting a project team to take responsibility for the elongated time frame of having to manage all of the behavioural change activities. But I think that if they are cognizant of what they are, then we can have a far better relationship, because there's an understanding within the project team then that early insight of what they're doing and collaboration between those who are going to use what they create and themselves actually softens that curve quite considerably and shortens it as well. So I think understanding what these change activities actually are, it makes you a far more effective project manager. And I'm not just saying that this afternoon. I'm actually 10 years ago, I remember giving a presentation with the then chair of the Association for Project Management, and we both spoke about the fact that, you know, the future of project management is delivering value and delivering benefits, and a key element of that is through behavioural change and the change management activities. Not exactly expecting you to carry it all out, but if you're cognizant of it, then that helps. But at the same time, I do know that certain project teams will have somebody from a change management role assigned to them, and you won't get value if you don't know how to sort of manage that resource. And you can't manage that resource unless you know what it is they're doing and what value they're creating. Equally, I do expect anybody working in change to be respectful of what project managers are going through. Project managers have a pretty hard time. The project team is always up against it, because let's be honest, they're inventing something that's never been created or invented before, not in those circumstances. So they might be writing new code, they might be creating a new design for something. So they're already at the sharp end. And I think for those of us within change, it helps to understand what they're going through, so that we can understand the impact of some of our requests from them. So I'm looking for the fact that these are two complementary disciplines and that we work together. I think we can both help each other out. And we've got a common goal. The common goal is not to get to the point of project delivery. The common goal is to realise benefits for the organisation, for the customers. So we're on the same side. We both want the same thing, but what we do is we add different value to that equation. So I don't think project managers are change managers. I don't think change managers are project managers, but I do think we ought to be aware of each other's discipline and come together and collaborate on it. So Jocelyn still looks like she's reading like crazy, but I'm going to put her on the hot spot now and ask her to share a few of the comments that have come in. So we were talking about, if that's what Agile change is all about, we were talking about what this means in terms of multiple deliveries and flexing our deliveries. So over to you, Jocelyn. What comments have we got from the group?
Thanks, Melanie. You're exactly right. There's been numerous comments which are filling the screen, which is fantastic. So thank you everybody for those. Just a few that I've picked out so far. We're looking at the speed of delivery, the ability to manage expectations, and also to change direction throughout the project.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? I'm typing them up as we go. Yeah.
We've got improved stakeholder engagement, which is throughout the project, so not just at the beginning and end, so we can keep those people engaged.
Okay, I'm going to pick up on a few of these things. I'll start with that
then
one.
We come to
improved stakeholder engagement. I think you're absolutely right. One of the things that we've got is, instead of me sort of marketing my achievements, not just my progress. This for me is a major point, which is that with an agile approach, I can actually say, but we've put this into operational use, we put that into operational use, rather than sort of saying, well, I've done this, 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 and this. So there's something concrete about what I'm offering to my stakeholders, and that certainly gets their engagement. I can talk about early benefits. And that certainly is far more impressive, isn't it, than somebody telling you what progress they've made towards the deliverable. So I think there's something in that. You're right, change direction throughout the project, respond to live information. We all know in our own lives how incredibly frustrating it is when somebody's got a process and they're going to stick to it no matter what, even though, you know, there might be chaos in the marketplace and they're still going, but this is our process. But if we respond to live information, we are, by our very nature, we're being very responsive. And that's a very attractive quality, because it's about being respectful of what's different and keeping value in mind all of the time. I think with manage expectations, it is about being, you know, we're going to look at this in just a moment, but there's something here about not over promising and under delivering, which is something we're always worried about in project management. So I think we can actually say, well, this is what we're going to do. Let's see what happens first, and then we'll come back to it. And I think the speed of delivery, it's actually the speed of difference. You know, I've made a difference within 3 or 4 months, not within 18 months. And I have to be honest, at the sharp end of this in boardrooms right now, if I look back to how I started my project management career, where I used to be, first of all, I was part of, and then I started to be responsible for major programs of work that might be 2 to 3 years in duration. Well, I don't meet many people in the boardroom these days who've got the attention span past about 3 or 4 months. And that's not to belittle the directors that I work with. It's the fact is that they are expected to make a difference very quickly. And therefore, they're looking for things that can help them make a difference very quickly. To sort of say, well, we should be able to deliver something around early 2024. Well, I mean, just how does that sound to you? You know, just wait quietly for 3 years and we'll get something improved. It just doesn't seem realistic in the world that we're in at the moment. Any other comments that have come through, Jocelyn? Anything you want to add?
So we've got a few around the iterative development, those resulting in like a staggered change.
Very. All right. I really like the idea of staggered change. I think there is something in there about it's not wholesale alteration of how we do things. So it's a sort of gentle build up of new skills and new approaches. So I think there's something there about one of the benefits of iterative development. And I'm not stupid, by the way, because I'm very well aware that this drip feed iterative development, if I just go back to this earlier slide, does do what we've got here on the right hand side, which means it does increase the volume of change. But smaller volume of change, less changing, we can slip a few changes in. So if I can just sort of get a few things done, we get used to those, we build up the confidence of people because they've achieved a shift in how they're working. And then we can actually go back in and achieve the next shift. So I do think there's something about that gentle build-up of new skills and approaches that is very effective. And I'll be honest, in a VUCA world, where there's so much uncertainty everywhere else, I am a little gun shy these days of doing such a massive implementation that I'm actually throwing everything up in the air and hoping it might all land. I would much rather, from a risk perspective, actually get staff to change a little bit of what they're doing and get some feedback that that's going okay before we do the next change. I think we've got too many challenges, and there's too much pressure on delivery of services to our customers, business as usual, you might call it. That the idea that I might sort of say, oh, we'll completely change how we're doing it. It'll be a big bang approach. That makes me incredibly nervous right now. So yeah, I love that comment. And a couple more from you, Justin?
We've got a generic comment, so it's less of a barrier to change than compared to the traditional kind of project management approach.
Yeah, I don't know the background to the word barrier, but I do, and how that person's interpreted it, but I do agree. I think what I've just said about smaller change is, it's less, the hurdle's not as high, we don't have to leap quite as high, so is definitely less of a barrier. But I also think that I'm asking, I'm going to put this in, asking for less imagination, which is less of a barrier. And what I mean by that is early evidence makes things real, not imagined. So I'm not asking people to imagine this amazing new feature. What I'm going to give them is some early proof that if we make this little tweak here, things go a little bit better here. And therefore, can I have your permission to make the next little tweak? So I do think there's something in there about asking for less imagination and less. And I think that whole visioning of the new world, well, we're too busy to sort of sit back and try to do all this sort of creative thought. So if I ask you to have less imagination, because I'm trying to get you to imagine in a couple of months, we're going to stop using that form and we're going to replace it with the drop-down menu on this screen. That seems an awful lot easier to absorb and to consume than is if I'm asking you to completely imagine how we're going to push a self-service system out to our customers, and you won't be doing that anymore, and you'll be doing this now. That's a bigger ask. So that's a really great one. And probably one more from you.
So there's a couple that I might just combine. One of them is in terms of getting user feedback in real time. And the other is kind of realizing return on investment sooner rather than later.
Right, okay, I'm going to actually keep those as separate ones. And I think getting user feedback in real time, I think what that can do, it can do a couple of things, is that it gives us a chance to adjust. We can adjust and take on board the comments more easily. You know what it's like if you're asked to give feedback. I was asked by HSBC the other day to give feedback on their service. Well, to be honest, it's so awful that I could have written for 5, 6 or 7 hours and still not captured it all. Whereas if they'd stopped every few minutes to check on how badly they were doing, I could have given them a specific piece of feedback and perhaps they could have adjusted it. So it's one of those things where if I have to, if I have to give big feedback, I'm going to miss the detail. So I think so we can adjust and take on board the comments more easily, and also users less likely to miss out the details. So the feedback is richer and more useful because of that. So I think there's lots of connections here about why Agile makes so much more sense. And realizing the return on investment sooner rather than later. As I said just before you went into the breakout rooms, I've been in project and change my entire life. I started as a business analyst, so I am used to being seen. Certainly, the thing is, there's definitely a preference in the boardroom. There is definitely a view that it's where the money's made in commercial organizations that that gets the attention. So I'm used to being a cost center and the difficulties that creates, whereas it's much nicer to be a profit center. It's much nicer to be seen as somebody who's making a positive difference. So realizing return on investment sooner rather than later isn't just an economic benefit. What I think it gives us, it generates respect and support for what we are doing. And I think, therefore, that makes that sponsorship more real as well. So those are my takes on that. Anything that I've missed there, Jocelyn? Anything else you'd like to add in before we move to how we might do it?
No, I mean, just another thank you for all of the fabulous comments. I think we've captured the majority, but yeah, if people want to read through those, we can certainly compile those at the end as well and share afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. And I've kept them on the slide there. So let me move on then. And let me talk about, well, how are we going to do it? If we like it, which we seem to like it, we seem to think it's helpful. So let's talk about the sort of leadership that we need. And I don't mean leadership as a role. I'm talking about leadership as a behaviour now, which we're all responsible for. So here's a few of my highlights. I think the first is that as a leadership behaviour, I need to get comfortable with uncertainty. On the top of this diagram, what we've got is a traditional approach. We've got the Gantt chart, which, of course, we've gathered all the requirements and we've set them out in this fantastic logical order. And I'm never going to be the one who trashes the traditional approach, because I think if you have certainty and you know exactly what it is you have to be doing and there's no argument about the requirements, then let's use this traditional approach. As some of you know, I moved house recently and I absolutely used the traditional approach because I didn't need to keep stopping and asking for feedback. I didn't want any feedback about how we're packing the rooms, just get them packed. So I think the traditional approach has its benefits, but there is a problem. And I think that the Gantt chart for me sums up attractive deception, because I've drawn thousands of them in my life, but I create them and it implies that I absolutely know with certainty every single activity that's going to happen, and it's going to happen on these certain dates. And we all know, don't we? The further out I get date-wise, the bigger the lie I'm telling and the more adjustments that I need to make. So I'm promising a certainty that really, really doesn't exist, but it looks so attractive. So yes, attractive deception is the thing that I'm concerned about. Whereas what I have to get my head around as a leader, I think, is that instead of doing all that planning up front, what I'm going to have to do is gather, not gather all the requirements, but I need to sort of take a little bit. Don't plan everything up front. Don't create that complete plan, but start small and concentrate on the most valuable changes. And we're going to look at valuable changes in a bit. This takes courage because it looks as if we don't know what we're doing. Look at the bottom diagram. Yes, I've got a few items there, and then the rest of them are sort of hazy arrows, not yet planned, awaiting feedback to decide the next most valuable idea. It doesn't look as certain. So what I have to do as a leader is be really accepting of that and be prepared to invest in that uncertainty, because what I'm doing is I'm prioritizing that flexibility over what looks good at the top there, but doesn't really sort of come true. And also what I'm prioritizing is the opportunity to respond to change, to be flexible, to be innovative down the bottom, which at the top I'm not. I'm just trying to stick to my original recipe, not change the recipe as circumstances change around me. So I think that takes real courage. So that's the first thing. I think one of the other things is that with that that courage, what you have to have is the courage of your convictions. And I think the conviction you have to have is, look, in the grand scheme of things, this is where we're trying to get to. I know I don't know every step on the journey right now, but I am pretty clear that what I need my organisation to be able to do in the future, I need it to have a new capability. I'm pretty clear on the difference that we need to make. I'm not going to get into the exact how we get there because I'm going to respond to circumstances, but I have at least set a compelling destination. Now, as we saw earlier on, I do accept that compelling destination changes shape over time, and we're backing that up with some horizon scanning. So I think that's absolutely right. I think we know that things are different. But I think what we can get into and what's important is that we, and I do mean all of us responsible for making change happen in our project and our change roles, is that we have to ask these questions and facilitate conversation around not the exact project deliverables and therefore the exact changes that are going to happen, but a wider picture of what do we need to be able to do in the future, maybe along the what products or what services, or how we do that in terms of manual versus automation, for example, or who we do it with, who are going to be our partners, what's the balance between internal and external resources, do we do it onshore and offshore, how frequently do we do something, how regularly do we do something. I mean, I think we can have this conversation, and we can keep that conversation at that higher level of, look, where are we aiming to get to? You probably all know the metaphor around Agile, which is that instead of it being like on railway tracks where we visit every single station and those stations are known in advance, what we're trying to do here is agree this is the port we're getting to, but actually what we're going to be is in a sailing boat, and we're going to tack back and forth based on wind speed and tide. So we're going to remain flexible, but we still absolutely need the destination. That doesn't change. So I think there is something around a skill, and I want to have a look at one of the ways we can do this now, that skill is to be absolutely clear about the sort of the end goal, and start to have that kind of conversation. Now, what I've found is really helpful psychologically, and there's lots of good research about why this works, is that sometimes it's easy to say what we will include, what we hope will be in place at the end goal, and sometimes it's easier to say what we absolutely don't want to include as part of the end goal. So sometimes we talk about what's in scope, and what we, therefore the opposite of that, by saying what the opposite is, we start to create a sort of clear boundary. By saying what's in scope, but then what's not in scope, again, we start to sort of build a sort of boundary around the whole thing. And that gives us a bit more clarity, because after all, the problem is when I say that I want, for example, I want a digital transformation, that's the end goal. Well, heavens, my understanding of what I mean by digital transformation will be affected by my own experiences, my own ambitions for the organisation, the values that I hold, my understanding of what digital means. And yours might be different. So is there a way in which we can absolutely clarify what that means? So in other words, what can I put here is that if I say something's in scope, like I might say, our digital transformation includes automating as many processes as we possibly can. So automation is in scope, but we are not going to be using any kind of artificial intelligence. So that's excluded. Or maybe what I'm saying is we will have customer self-service. So we want customers to do more for themselves, but excluded from that is a complete eradication of people. So I'm starting to put some boundaries around. It's a big idea, but it's definitely worth looking at the boundaries of this. Now, if you want to play this game, it's probably a bit too little time this afternoon to be looking at what that end goal is in terms of a big piece. But if you think about, if you took the role of project manager, for example, and we wanted to use the same technique, what you might talk about is, and this is one of the classics, the job title might say, you're responsible for stakeholder engagement. Well, why don't we nail that down using this technique? You know, why don't we sort of say, well, what that means is that I am responsible for running an identification process on a regular basis. It might be that I'm responsible for creating the communication strategy, but of course excluded, what's not in my job is carrying out every single piece of staff communication, because there are lots of different parties that I want to do that. So this scope and exclusions game can be used in all sorts of different ways, but it makes a real difference. It's a practical activity. Have a think for a minute. Take anything. Like I used the phrase stakeholder engagement. You try that one. You try to think, well, what do you think is included in that? What do you think is excluded from that for your particular role? I'll shut up for a couple of minutes while you have a bit of a think, and then we'll carry on. Always difficult in a conference of this size to leave you alone long enough. And I'd love to spend more time on this, but I'm hoping afterwards you'll have a bit of a think about that and just find out how incredibly useful it is that when you say something is included, you try and write the opposite of what that means. Where's the boundary? This is included, but this is not included. And when you start to play with that, you start to realize just how very specific we're actually getting into and how much clearer perhaps that end goal might actually look. So I think there's something in there around a different skill, which is being able to leap ahead into the future and go, I want us to be able to do these things. We know that there'll be interim deliverables on the path to being able to do those things, and we want to make sure that each of those is useful. But in order to work those things out, we need to know what that end goal looks like. So having had a bit of a go, I also want to now look at the fact that I think of one of the skills, and this is really, really hard, and anyone who's been on the Agile Change Agent course knows that this plays with your head, is that there's a real skill in being able to break something up into its component parts. And I'm going to demonstrate this to you just to show exactly what I mean. So what we do is we take that end goal, and we have to break it down into the key outcomes that we're looking to deliver. Each of those outcomes should be able to go into operational use. So, and once we've worked out what the outcomes look like, then we can work out what the new ways of working are. So we sort of do it step by step. And when we've worked out what the new outcomes and the new ways of working are, we can work out what all the tasks are to actually deliver on that. Let me demonstrate, right? Let me take you through a demonstration. So I'm actually going to come out of here and do this one. And this is what not to do. And then this is what to do, okay? So if I'm looking at the outcome, a lot of people, they break down the end goal to the best of their ability. What they'll do is they'll give me a list which says, okay, I've broken down the end goal, Mel. This is what it actually means. So let's see if I can get this right. So they'll say things like, let's say I'm going for a paperless office. So the thing that I want to achieve is that and this is a live one of mine somewhere in the world at the moment. This is sort of revolutionary thinking. And so what they're doing is they're sort of saying, well, the first thing we need to do is provide access to online tools. We need to train people in the use of online tools. Seems sensible so far. We need to archive existing paper. We need to stop the printing contract with the printing company that prints all our templates. And we need to create online templates. I'm sure you could come up with just as important a checklist for this. Yeah, so it's all, you know, it's all there. You've got all the stuff. Okay. I'm aware that perhaps that isn't quite big enough for you to see, so I'm just making it bigger. Okay, so there we go. So we've got all the things that we want to be doing, and there's nothing at all wrong with that, but those are not outcomes. Instead, what I need to think about is that there are three outcomes. Those three outcomes are, well, the first one I want to go for is here. Let me see if I can get it to work. Zoom's not helping me at the moment. But the first outcome surely is that actually I make paperless those who consume the most paper in the office, those who consume the most paper. Because why? Because that is what will make the greatest difference. That will give us the greatest value. So we'll go with who uses the most paper. And then funnily enough, what's the next outcome? The next heaviest user of paper. This is not difficult. Once you've got the hang of it, you suddenly start to think, okay, this makes perfect logical sense. She's making sense now. And then funnily enough, what's the next outcome? The next heaviest user of paper. Now, what happens with that outcome is that we are going to go through these 5 activities. Yeah, absolutely. But at the end, what we would have done is we would have transferred to paperless working the heaviest users of paper. And then we'll do the next round, and this time it will be the next heaviest user of paper, and then the one after that. We're going from macro to micro, and we're working through, and what we're doing is we're adding real value. So hopefully, if I just go back to an earlier diagram, you'll start to see that this one here, this is exactly what we do. So instead of doing every single activity for everybody in that country, and there are 8 offices in the country, but we're actually launching the online tools, doing all of the training in one giant heap. We're creating all of the templates, everything, and making everybody wait until everybody's going at the same speed, which means that we're going at the speed of the slowest person. The project takes much longer. How about what we do is we do it in little bite-sized pieces. We'll configure the online system. We'll train people on the online system. We'll start giving them templates, online templates, but we'll do it for that particular group. Who's that group? The ones where it will make the greatest difference. Where's it going to make the greatest difference? The ones that seem to be working through trees at a rate of knots when it comes to paper. So let's do it like that. I'm hoping that that makes sense, but that hopefully brings to life what we're talking about here in terms of how Agile really works. That's what we're trying to get to. And that brings me to my last point of the afternoon, which is that as a leadership skill, not only do I need you to do this decomposition, but I also need you as a leader to be willing to step in and go, yes, we will go with that particular group first, and then we'll go with this group next. So underpinning everything that we do in Agile is this willingness to prioritize. And what we're looking for here, let's just get through these, is that as far as prioritization is concerned, what's the highest in terms of prioritization? The strongest contribution to our critical success. And that's often the benefits, the strongest contribution to benefits. So who's the strongest contribution to benefits? We'll reduce our paper usage, we'll reduce our printer usage. That team there, because they use the most paper at the moment. So we're making the greatest difference in the shortest possible time. So there's our top priority. So we're constantly, if you like, in order to work this out, we have to go with the highest business value outcome first, then the next, then the next. And that means we have to get really good at prioritizing. So let's have one last activity together, right? what I want you to do is you've got 60 seconds, and I am going to time it, 60 seconds to write your to-do list. I want you to brainstorm everything. It's Monday. The idea of the weekend is so far away from us. We can't even conceive of having time off. We've got so much we should be doing right now. It makes our heads throb. What I want you to do is for the next 60 seconds, brainstorm away. Off you go. Write down every single thing that you've got to do. And then I'll give you the next part of the activity. So off you go. I can't be the only one who's overwhelmed by the amount of stuff on my list, can I? I bet I'm not. What I want you to do now, and this is the thing to keep in mind, is that in order for me to pick the thing that's most valuable, what I need you to do is look at your list. You're only allowed to choose one thing. And this is why it's so helpful, because what I'm going to ask you to do is, in choosing that one thing, I want you to think, why? What are the reasons that underpin that choice? The reason is that when you find those factors that underpin that choice, that will align pretty closely to your critical success factors. That will help you find your must-have items. It will help you find, actually, these are the reasons why I choose these things first and these things next. It's a great trick for really helping you practice the willingness to prioritize and take decisions. Give it a go. Have a look at the one thing. If you weren't allowed to do anything else this week, and there was one thing you only got to do, what would be the one thing that you drive through the whole list and go, that's non-negotiable? And then try to work out why you've picked that one thing.